The imitative rationalist aesthetic look, aesthetic, the imitative rationalist aesthetic took on a predominantly mechanical color in the 18th century. Poetry was regarded as craftsmanship, whose mastery depended on following certain rules. Critics like Boileau and Racine sought to lay down once for all standards of lasting validity in arts. The writing of a book was often compared with the making of a clock or an engine. Gaucher laid down a grotesque mechanical recipe for the making of a tragedy. Let the poet first choose a moral precept which he wants to impress on his audience by means of the senses. Then he invents a general story to illustrate the truth of famous people to whom something similar has happened, and from them the borrows names for the characters in his story in order to give it a semblance of reality. After this, he thinks of all the attendant circumstances necessary to make the man's story really probable, and these are called the subplots and episodes. He then divides his material into 5 pieces, all of approximately equal length, and arranges them so that each section follows from the preceding section, but he does not bother further whether everything corresponds to the historical happenings or nor whether the subsidiary characters bore these or other names. In such a view, obviously, there was no place for the creative imagination. The word imagination did exist in the 18th century, but it was used in mechanical sense. Images, it was believed, move across the mind's eye in succession if they recur in the same spatial and temporal order as in the original experience. It is memory, but if they recur in the different order or combine to produce a new whole, is imagination. Plato worshipped the daughters of memory, while Blake's muses are the daughters of imagination. Although imagination is not so central a concept in William Wordsworth's theoretical pronouncement, accords to it the same place as to the other romantics. Imagination, in the sense of the word, as giving title to a class of the following poems, has no reference to images that are merely a faithful copy, existing in the mind of the absent external objects, but is a word of higher import, denoting operations of the mind upon those objects and processes of creation or of composition governed by certain fixed laws. William Wordsworth then proceeds to illustrate the operation of imagination by the use of the word hang in Virgil, Shakespeare, and Milton, and by the use of certain other words in his own poetry. After discussing the conferring, the abstracting, and the modifying powers of the imagination, he adds, the imagination also shapes and creates by innumerable processes, and in none does it more delight than in that of consolidating numbers into unity, and dissolving and separating unity into number. Alternations proceeding from and governed by a sublime consciousness of the soul in her own mighty and almost divine powers. Coleridge's theory of imagination is the most compact and comprehensive of all the romantic statements on imagination. Coleridge's theory of imagination is the most compact and comprehensive of all the romantic statements on imagination. In his view, in S.T. Coleridge's view, it is a vital and creative power. It is a prominent and creative power which dissolves, diffuses, and dissipates. In order to recreate. This theory deserves a detailed treatment which will be told to you. My dear students, William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge, both of them are the very great poets of this period. William Wordsworth sent the first draft of the poem to Mary Hutchinson, his future wife, and her sister Shara. Shara later to be the Coleridge's beloved. William Wordsworth sent the first draft of his poem to Mary Hutchinson, his future wife, and her sister Shara. Shara later to be Coleridge's beloved and wife also. It seems that they commented on it in detail. About the comments are not available. Fortunately, I would like to say you about this letter which William Wordsworth wrote to his wife, would-be wife. My dear Sarah, I am exceedingly sorry that the later part of the leech gatherer has displeased you. The more so because I cannot take to myself that being the case. Much pleasure or satisfaction in having pleased you in the former part. I will explain to you in prose my feelings in writing that poem, and then you will be better able to judge whether the fault be mine or partly both. My dear Sarah, I describe myself as having been exalted to the highest pitch of delight by the joyousness and beauty of nature, and then as depressed, even in the midst of those beautiful objects, to the lowest dejection and despair. A young poet in the midst of happiness of nature is described as overwhelmed by the thought of the miserable reverses which have befallen the happiest of all men. As poets, I think of this till I am so deeply impressed by it that I consider the manner in which I was rescued from my dejection and despair almost as an interposition of providence. Now, whether it was by peculiar grace, a leading from above, a person reading this poem with feeling like mine will have been awed and controlled, expecting almost something spiritual or supernatural. What is brought forward? A lonely place, a pond by which an old man was, far from all house or home, not stood, not sat, but was the figure presented in the most naked simplicity possible. This feeling of spirituality or supernaturalness is again referred to as being strong in my mind in this passage. How came he here, thought I, or what can be doing? What can he be doing? I then describe him. Whether ill or well is not for me to judge. The perfect confidence, but this I can confidently affirm that though I believe God has given me a strong imagination. I can confidently affirm that though I believe God has given me a strong imagination. I cannot conceive a figure more impressive than that of an old man like this, the survivor of a wife and 10 children, traveling alone among the mountain and all lonely places, carrying with him his own fortitude and the necessities which an unjust state of society has entailed upon him. You say and marry, that is, you can say no more than that. The poem is very well after the introduction of the old man. This is not tried. If it is not more than very well, it is very bad. There is no intermediate state. You speak of his speech as tedious. Everything is tedious. When one does not read with the feeling of the author, the thorn is tedious to hundreds, and so it is idiot boy to hundreds. It is in the character of the old man to tell his story in a manner which an impatient reader must necessarily feels as tedious. But good God, such a figure in such a place, a pious self, respecting miserably infirm, and old man telling such a tale. My dear Sarah, it is not a matter of indifference whether you are pleased with this figure and his employment. It may be comparatively so. Whether you are pleased or not with this poem, but it is of the utmost importance that you should have had pleasure from contemplating the fortitude, independence, preserving spirit, and the general moral dignity of this old man's character. Your feelings upon the mother and the boy with the butterfly were not indifferent. It was an affair of whole continents of moral sympathy. I will talk more with you on this when we meet. At present, farewell, and heaven forever bless you. So, my dear students, in spite of the self-righteous tone of Wordsworth's letter, he did revise the poem, dropped a few tedious lines, and inserted the marvelous ninth stanza, beginning with as a huge stone on the operation of imagination. And this final version, Wordsworth himself commented. Inspiration. I.A. Richards propounded his materialistic aesthetic. The word inspiration is either fallen out of use or is used with a great deal of difference. In romantic criticism, however, it is one of the most central concepts. In romantic criticism, however, it is in romantic criticism, however, it is one of the most central concepts. Literally, to be inspired is to be breathed on by. Literally, to be inspired is to be breathed by Apollo, the god of poetry in Greek mythology, or in the Christian context of by the Holy Spirit. In the Hindu and Islamic context, the source of inspiration will be Saraswati and Allah respectively. Modern psychology would explain the phenomenon with reference to the individual subconscious or the collective unconsciousness. But the collective consciousness is always the most important. The Romantic asserts their faith in unmistakable terms in the idea of inspiration. Organicism. How does a work of art which, on the Romantic view, is a result of inspiration achieve form and unity? Plato would answer the question with reference to his belief in innate ideas, which unconsciously enter a work of art and impart a form to it. Others refer the presence of form in a work of art to instincts such as the one possessed by bees and ants. The Romantics explain it by speaking of the work of art as an organism. Blake rejects Burke's theory of art, which is based on the dichotomy between conceptions and execution. Other Romantics use metaphors from the animal and the plant world to explain the unity of a work of art. Wordsworth, in his sonnets, a pat exhorts the poet that his work should grow like a forest tree or a meadow flower. So, my dear students, we have interacted about Romanticism, characteristics, definitions of poetry, and many things more. We discuss about the ideas of the different critic on different features. The lyrical ballad. William Wordsworth